What's the percentage of the US population that owns a boat today?
7%,
And what is the percentage of powerboats sold with outboard power?
87%.
The number of boats per household is going up. True or false?
That is true.
And what segment is growing the most
Pontoons have grown the most.
and the least?
Runabouts,
What is the average age of a US boater today?
60.
Welcome back to Full Displacement, the podcast by Current Yachts. I'm Marilyn Bosser, and with me is Amanda Haley. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, Marilyn.
We're here today with Peter Houseworth from InfoLink, and we're going to talk about metrics from the industry, data points from actual boat registrations that will guide the discussion of today about what do we know about the state of the market, how many boats are currently registered, what are the trends that people are reading. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Peter. How are you this morning?
Doing great. Marilyn, how are you? And Amanda, nice to see you as well.
We're doing great. We're excited to have you because the data points we're going to talk about today and the kind of information that you're going to share with us is rarely seen by just the layperson. So I wanted to really dive into it right away. Tell us how this data is available by your company, InfoLink, and how you share it with manufacturers and OEMs and others in the industry. Tell us more about InfoLink.
Thank you very much. We're happy to be here. Another day of talking about boats. Everyone keeps saying, "Oh, when are you going to retire?" I'm saying, when I stop talking about boats, that's when I'm going to retire. you know. But we're pretty passionate about it, as are both of you. We've all been in it a lifetime, so we've been, fully inoculated. But at the end of the day, it's actually a business. While we're all passionate about it, we also have to realize that we've got a $55 billion industry, according to the NMMA, and there's a lot of things that go on to make that $55 billion. And we are, at our heart, we're a market research firm. We compile data from all 50 states and the Coast Guard. We assimilate all of that data, and we have a constant flow of information. We get updates from every state and the Coast Guard every single month. So we're constantly processing data. So we're turn this around and turn it back into the industry to help monitor changes that are taking place. So we deal with boat manufacturers, we deal with engine manufacturers, we deal with all the trade associations, as well as dealers and brokers. Here's what's happening out there in real time, close to real time, as well as insurance companies, finance companies, so you name it. At the end of the day, what we try to do is we are trying to help businesses make more informed decisions based on fact. In actuality, the industry, depending on which segment you're talking about, it behaves differently. And normally, we are extracting very detailed, very granular thing about specifics to the business that we're addressing. But today, we're looking at a big picture view of what's gone on in the industry over time.
Thanks for that introduction, Peter. That's very insightful. And I think what is really unique about the US market is the access to data that is available and can be aggregated. Most of that data is not necessarily personal data, but it's general data around boats and the size of the market, as Peter just described. And it's pretty rare to have access to such good data. And can you share with us how long has InfoLink been around?
27 years.
And you have been there from the start, right?
25 years I've been here. So yeah, we've all been here pretty much since the beginning.
So, Peter, you had an introduction explain that we're going to jump into some high-level data points regarding the market. So this is it. If you're catching up with this episode without the video associated with this presentation, I will put the link to the slides below so you can refer back to them. And without further ado, we're going to jump into the data.
Yeah, so starting out, the big kind of picture view is that boats actually are around and going to be around for a very long time. So today, across all boat types, the average powerboat is now 25 years old. And that is, a little bit older than some people might expect. I mean, you look and, sometimes you can look at a vessel and it's hard to tell how old it is. I've seen boats that are 50 years old that look like they just came out yesterday. And in fact, it's 50 years old or 60 years old, and it looks absolutely beautiful. Conversely, there are some that are not so well taken care of that may not be that old, but they certainly look it. But the true statistic is 25 years old. Looking forward, and that's one of the few things that a fleet allows us to do is to be able to project what happens going forward because it exists. There's a basis from which to project, and new boats are a little bit more difficult to project, but on the pre-owned boat side, those boats are going to be around for a very long time.
Okay.
We expect that trend will continue. As the technology, both the chemicals as well as the processes have improved so much. I mean, from chopped mat to resin infusion, that's a game changer in terms of longevity and all that. Just looking at it, the boats that are being added today will go very long into the future. So
Okay.
we basically expect that to continue. One of the things that really isn't known that much about is the fact that how large the pre-owned market is. The pre-owned market, what I kind of use is the adage that pre-owned boats are the oil. It's the lubrication for the system. Most of the people that buy a new boat, a different boat, a bigger boat, a smaller boat, already have a boat. It's a relatively small proportion. So in order to make that machine work, you're trading in what you have to do the next thing that you want to do. And that, kind of, again, lubricates the system. That it's a key component of our industry, as well as it drives a lot of the economy. Just to give you a kind of an order of magnitude, for every new boat sold in the U.S. in 2025 is 4.2 pre-owned boats get sold. So it's a substantial volume, and as I say, it's important to the health of the industry that it exists and that it's fluid.
Yes, and you would say you expect that number to continue rising as boats just last longer now that we have fiberglass boats and systems that
Yep,
are lasting
right.
longer in general. Okay. Good.
That's correct. Yep, yep. So now we start looking at this over time, and a couple of things pop out. The boats are getting bigger. There's less small boats being added to the fleet over time, and there's a bunch of different things that go into that, and we're going to get into that into more of the detail about what's underneath that in a few minutes. The other striking observation is the total domination of outboard power versus the other propulsion types. 87% of power boats sold in the U.S. last year were actually outboard powered. So if you go back historically, whatever, going back to the 2000s and before, stern and inboard existed in, many different segments. There were pontoon stern boat, stern drive pontoon boats. There were stern drive freshwater fishing boats, and as well as inboard and stern drive saltwater fishing boats as well.
Right.
But over time, those, it's almost entirely now outboard, but the last piece of that is that now outboard powered has migrated and is now dominant in both the cruiser and the yacht segment. If you look at yachts, and we call yachts, anything that's 33 foot plus is our classification.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, that's a huge number.
Yeah, this is one of those things that means something long term because all of these boats are going to have to be repowered at some point. If you're an outboard manufacturer, you've got a built in demand that will go out for years. And I can tell you exactly what it's going to be because it exists today. So I can count it.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is outboard motors, when my family used to have an old Chris Craft with an inboard, and my dad, to think about repowering that was a nightmare and a half. Now with outboards, you can just put on a new outboard, easily accessible, and that's why everybody's moving towards that. Lower units are expensive to maintain and keep in check, but the fact that it's easy to repower, and what you were saying before, that
Easy.
the fiberglass portion of the boat is going to last even longer, it bodes well for the used boat industry.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
for
mean,
sure.
it's pretty amazing when you look at it. An outboard is okay. Fine, unbolt it. It's a harness. Unclip the harness, clip in the new harness, and pop it on. That's it.
No, I agree. I was really shocked by the number. It's much higher than I thought. 100%.
Mhm.
That's That's the death of the stern drive right there, right?
And well, yeah, I mean, it's got a long time. It's just not going to be increasing
Right.
ever, I think, for at least in our lifetime. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Pricing, I mean, if you've been to some of the industry functions, it's something that's on the minds of people. Boating has become more challenging from an affordability standpoint, and it's true. I mean, you kind of, having been around it a long time, it's you kind of get some sticker shock going on there. The industry is looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, what can we do to address it? But it seems to be mostly focused on transparency. You can't, quote unquote, make it cheaper specifically, and it's kind of interesting that our industry is different. Most industries, and certainly, like a commodity, it's, the cure for high prices is high prices. You get more supply and therefore the price comes down. The cure for low prices is low prices. That means supply gets retracted. I'm not, there's no margin there. I'm not going to make it. And it self corrects and the price comes up because there's less supply. Our industry, to me, it feels like we're kind of mirroring the real estate market, that there's two ends, the high end and the middle end, the low end, and the lower end has been getting smaller and smaller. And it's because it's, affordability. I mean, whatever, even a small, a new small runabout is 60, 70, $80,000.
Another add on to that is it's not just about the cost to acquire the boat, it's the cost to keep, maintain your boat. And that also has gone up significantly. And, you're speaking about transparency, and that's exactly what we do at Current Yachts, because we have people coming to us all the time that are early in their research and perhaps don't quite understand that the cost of ownership is a real thing that will continue every year, year after year. And it can vary depending on the size of the boat, say 8 to 12% of your purchase price. That's a given every year. And so we're here to educate so that people are not caught off guard when it comes time to, renew your insurance or get into a new marina because your slip rate went up. All of these things really, really do matter. And another comment I had on boat clubs, which you and I had talked about when we prepared this presentation, was the usage is just really low. A lot of people just can't justify this expense on top of the cost rising. I think you had
Yep.
mentioned, is it 50 hours of use per year on average for?
On average.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's way
And
too
it's
low.
actually, yeah, they're we're actually in the middle of doing the National Recreational Boating and Safety Survey, which will get us some updated statistics as to usage and frequency and whatever length of use and all that kind of thing. That'll be available in about a year. It's out in the field right now. It's something that we're doing with the Coast Guard and with Newark, and is National Opinion Research of Chicago. So and it's something we've done before, but we're getting some updated things. So I mean, and the boat clubs is a solution to this, and we think that the boat club has a lot of room to run. It just makes more sense that it's there, it's available, but you're not shouldering all of the dynamics, whatever, as an individual. You're basically spreading the cost among 5 to 8, as many as 10 people. So we see a great future for it. And another thing about the boats themselves, and just in terms of the fleet and everything, is we're finding we're constantly coming out with new and better technology. And certainly a lot of the safety things that come out can be retrofit onto existing boats, and so that kind of goes back to they'll be around for a long time because you can upgrade and do the things that are being added on an aftermarket basis. The things that they're adding to new boats today, you can put on your pre-owned boat and keep it upgraded.
Okay. Great. So we're going to move on from these first, top line observations to talk about the fleet, Peter. So I'm going to bring on screen the breakout of the fleet over the years to show how the U.S. recreational fleet has changed. Can you comment on this slide, Peter?
The green line across the top is the total fleet. So that's the total number of boats that are registered in the U.S. So it goes back to 2000 and through this most recent year. So yeah, we've seen a slight decline. It's not cataclysmic, but obviously you'd rather see a positive growth trend. But it's gone from approximately 12 million to a little over 11 million currently.
So let me pause here to clarify what this means. There are currently roughly just under 11 million boats in circulation, currently registered or stay titled in the U.S.
Most of the slides that we're going to go through excludes PWCs, personal watercraft,
Okay, so no
just
jet
because
skis in
it's
here.
really
Yep.
large and it's a whole different thing.
Okay.
So, we tend to, when we talk about the core of the industry, it's kind of an unusual segment, but because it's so large, it skews all of your other numbers. So we kind of tend to leave them out, but in this case, they're included. So the bars across the bottom are the number of boat owning households. So we've gone from just shy of 10 million to right about 8 million as of the end of 2025. The issue is that if you were to draw a line from zero and up to the top right, that's what the population is doing. So the population is continually increasing, and the boating population is slowly decreasing. And it's about 100,000 a year on average. Some better, some worse. You'll see when we get into some of the pandemic that okay, we had a little bit of a reversal, but it's reverting. Like most things, reverts back to mean. So what we're seeing is a very slow, gradual decrease in the size of the boat market.
So that brings me to the question, Peter, of the US population, what is the percentage of actual boat owners from this trend?
It's about 7%. It was up as high as 10, 12. But over time, both with the increase in population and the decrease in the boating population, it has declined somewhat, and that's a long-term issue that we're, as an industry, we're having to address.
And I'm sure we're going to see the average age of a boat owner in this data. That'll be interesting to see as well.
Yeah, that comes later.
So before we move on to the more granular view of this ownership trend, what I think we can note here is while the fleet size is shrinking, the number of boats per household is actually up. It's now 24% of household that own more than one boat. Am I reading this correctly, Peter?
That is correct. Yeah, so and there's a couple of different things, because the boats themselves are getting bigger. So people that have a 50-foot yacht in back of their house usually have something smaller that they run off and have dinner. You're not going to take your 50-foot Sea Ray because whatever docking but you have some kind of center console. You have some other
Right.
thing, and much of that is PWC actually.
Okay.
So this is a look at what the fleet looks like as of the end of 2025. So think of this as vintage. These are the vintage years of the boats that are out in circulation today. And to my comments earlier, you can see the impacts that things have on our industry. Most of the things that were made are still in existence. People think, oh, there's hurricanes and fires, and we're talking about tiny numbers of boats that actually get destroyed and are no longer in existence.
Yeah, I was going to translate, but what this means is, however, the economic impact of some of these either legislation, such as the luxury tax that you have here on the chart, or impact from the Great Recession, those are directly correlating with how many boats are actually being built. So that, to your point, reduction in that particular model year.
You can see there's one little dip here without a call out on it, and that basically was the .com bust. And then we had the Great Recession, which that hit 95% of boat owners own a single family home. And what went on in the real estate market, it was pretty devastating. And a lot of wealth was wiped out in that time, and it shows up in our industry. And then lastly is the pandemic, which really was a very short term. It was okay, stop everything, but then it flipped immediately to okay, go, go, go. So it bounced right back. The companies that make the boats had to basically, follow like everybody else. That's it. It's closed, just stop.
Hmm.
But then it came back on and very quickly recovered. So you can just see there are long arcs to our industry. It's 10 years of click, 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 do better, 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 better. And then bang, something happens. And then we go click, 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 and ratchet our way back up. So, this happens to be for the entire fleet, but it looks different for each of the different segments. So, it's an average age of okay. So the average is at 35. You can see at the bottom pontoon boats, which we're going to talk a little bit about that industry, and it's much younger. It's growing. It has grown much more rapidly.
I'm putting up on screen now that the breakdown that you were just talking about that shows the fleet size 2015 to present time for 2025. we can see a lot of changes here between the different segments. And I wanted your commentary on this, Peter, because at first glance, it may look like, the decrease from Runabout perhaps was compensated into towboats, but actually that's not what happened at all. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's each one has its own dynamic. So, to our discussion earlier is there's different things going on with all of these customer bases as well. So there, you have to look at them individually as to what is actually driving it. Freshwater fish is a huge market. You think of all the Great Lakes, the interior lakes, that's mostly freshwater fishing environment. We're all in Florida. And so, that's our point of orientation, but there's a huge part of our industry is actually, on interior lakes and such. So, yeah, it's down 10%, but that's, over 10 years. So that's basically a percent a year. It's not panic factor, but it's, okay, it's gotten a little bit smaller. The hollowing out of the middle class that we've seen, and so on and so forth. So there are a couple of things that are going on there, but it's still a very, very large part of the market.
I was going to say it is still the largest. So freshwater fish represents
Yeah,
about
by a lot.
3.6 million units in 2025. Okay.
Yeah, and just kind of walking down. So the pontoon boat
Uh-huh.
market is an interesting kind of study. If we actually go back, we're up about 34% from 992,000 to 1.3 million. So there's 1.3 million currently registered pontoon boats in the U.S. It's actually been going on. This happens to be a 10-year slide. So we're looking at it from 10 years ago. But if you go back to, it's been actually going on for 20 years. It has been steadily increasing the percentage of boats every year. So it's gone from 12% back in 2000. So of all power boats, 12% were pontoon boats back in 2000. It's now 33. So it was, 1 in 8 and 1 in 3 now of all new
Wow.
boats sold are pontoon boats. So it's dramatic.
Just to add on to the pontoon side, you had said, Peter, it's not like one type of boat buyer goes into another. In the case of pontoon, you had said that over 50% of pontoon owners are actually first-time boat buyers in 2025, correct?
Yeah.
Which is incredible. What a huge success story, right?
I mean, it's right. I think I kind of liken it to when the SUV first came on the scene. It was like do anything, do everything. You can haul a lot of people, you can tow stuff, you can be a little bit rough in it, you can off road. It kind of has some of that it's very flexible. It's easy for grandma and grandpa to get on it, walk
Right.
around, move around. You can put a lot of people on it. You can tow tubes behind it. You can ski behind it. You can fish from it.
And Amanda, do you see this in your market too, like in the Southeast? It's not just interior lakes, correct?
Yeah, the trend is absolutely to get out on the water, and you see more and more pontoon boats out there. People just anchoring out, fishing, like you said. They're very versatile.
And to clarify too, pontoons are not inexpensive boats. Do you have data points at all on this, Peter, that you can share or no?
I can give you a data point. I walked into the Miami Boat Show and walked into a 24-foot pontoon boat. The price tag was $350,000. So yeah, I mean
Okay.
they are. I think it's probably at this point it's equivalent to the same thing in a fiberglass version of a similar size. But they've also added a lot of features to them, so there's a lot more technology. I mean, it used to be just basically a piece of dock that you threw an engine on the back. Well, now it's got stand-up showers and it's got coolers built in, and you can rearrange furniture. You can do all this stuff. So they've come a long way in terms of the engineering of these things as well. So there's some additional value, but they're not as inexpensive as they used to be.
And then can you comment on the fallout of the runabout, I guess? We were at 1.6 million units in
Yep.
2015 and we dropped
Yep.
to just above 1.1 million. So 28% drop in 10 years. What is that
Yeah.
about?
I think it's a combination of factors as well. Those are the kind of your entry level boat. So what we consider to be a runabout is a 16 to 21-foot kind of bow rider, your basic kind of general recreation boat. You can fish from a runabout, but that's not what it's designed for per se. You can ski from it. It's not what it's designed for, but it's kind of that kind of general purpose. As boats have become more expensive, less of the population can afford them.
So Runabout would be perhaps your entry level segment that gets hit hardest, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can see that possibly the pontoon market has taken a bit of that market. If it's the first time boat buyer and it's something much easier than say a runabout, maybe there is a fill in of a portion of that decrease.
Yeah, great marketing going
Yeah,
on
it's
there for sure.
yeah, we looked at that over time, and that, that's one of the things that we seldom say what we think is going to happen in the future. But in 2012, we looked at it, and what we found was that the proportion, so it's drawing from many things in equal proportion, and it hasn't changed. Therefore, it has longevity. Usually, it's okay if they're leaving this and going to that. At some point, you run out of people who are inclined to do that. That's not the scenario.
And there are two segments I wanted you to comment on as well. The first being the towboat, and we had talked about basically that category has morphed away from skiing, purely skiing, to wakeboarding. And then I wanted to
Right.
talk about the sail segment next.
The towboat, yeah, it's kind of an interesting study. So we looked at it. We tear into this stuff pretty well. It's done very well. These are not cheap boats. The most basic towboat now is going to be 175, 180,000 and go up from there. So it's not inexpensive for a 22-foot platform.
It sounds like there's one segment that's not reinventing itself too well. The sail market, Peter, what are you finding?
Oh, it breaks my heart as a lifetime sailor. it
It really
But
does,
it
right?
is what it is. I mean, that's part of our business is I can make data say anything I want to, but what I'm really looking for is, in the words of Tom Cruise, I'm looking for the truth.
Yeah.
That's what our objective is, even if it's not popular.
What we're seeing here is a 22% drop in boat registrations between 2015 and 2025. So we had a little over 301,000 units, and we're down to 236. That stings, right? That means that people are just turning away from sailing and either abandoning sailing altogether or doing something else.
Yeah, I think some of it is behavioral. You can't just pop out on a sailboat for an hour or two. It's more of an involved process, so it takes more of a dedicated time. If you go even further back, so the industry itself, the peak of the industry was in 1984, and this is registered sailboats. So we don't include small 420s, little
Right.
non-power lasers and sunfish and all that stuff. This is only what is registered, and generally that's going to go with mechanical propulsion. So it's got an engine on it. It's supposed to be registered.
Okay.
So among sailboat registrations, 1984 was the peak, and there were 6,000 boats made in that year. Last year, it's closer to 300.
Wait, we're now down only 300 new boats per year? That's like nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Amanda, any thoughts? Amanda is like so shocked she can't respond.
So I have seen the trend from being a little girl in my Hillsborough in the sailing club. The person I learned from had a 33-foot tartan, beautiful classic sailboat. He kept it behind a person's house in Pompano Beach, and he paid $400 per month to keep it there. And now to keep a boat behind someone's house in Pompano Beach, it's $1,500 to $2,000. And that makes it absolutely impossible for the average person raising a family who used to have this as their hobby to be able to afford a sport like this. But sailing has been priced out by the rising cost of ownership. And I think that's more of the trend. It's not so much that people don't love the sport anymore is that they can't afford the sport. So there is a big indicator of what's going on. Also, the aging out of people that know how to do these things. And
Yeah,
like you
we're gonna
said,
get into that. Oof, even in boating in general.
there's many factors that have led to the demise of the sailing industry. And I'm out there promoting that doesn't die and doing my best. I think the
Right.
charter industry
Likewise.
is going to help sailing not die.
All right. So we have quite a few slides we're going to cover. Let's move on to the next, which digs into the demographic. We were just talking about this.
Yeah. So far we've been really talking about boats and the age of the boats. And this particular slide, we're looking at the age of the people. On the left is the distribution that existed back in 2000.
Correct.
You can see that the average back then was in the mid 40s in terms of the age of the people who own boats. So this is across all boat owners.
And that average today is?
A little over 60.
That's insane.
So there's a couple of things going on here.
Sure.
You've got a kind of a distribution curve. So you can see that over time, what's happened is that you had back in 2000, you had adoption at, relatively younger age ranges. And over time, that has decreased. So there's less young people that own boats today. And we can go on for days about that.
Right? I mean, there are so many reasons for this, but we also talked about competing interests, hobbies
Yeah,
and
right.
travels and
And some of it is just behavioral. Find the generation that follows us is not as prone to ownership as we are. They
true.
love to experience and be part of it and have access to it. But, the ownership part is not as enticing, I guess.
Correct. I wanted to transition in the new versus pre-owned breakdown. We talked about that comparison earlier. So for every 4 pre-owned boat transaction, there's 1 new boat transaction. And here is that breakdown over the years in terms of volume. I'll let you comment on these slides, Peter. It's pretty steady, I would say, over time.
Yeah. Yeah, some of it is just people's perception. So kind of get the feeling, talking around the industry that it's not so good, it's wishy washy. It's not the best of times, but it's not the worst of times either.
Right.
I mean, that's just the reality. So we're looking at the new to pre-owned boat transactions. So the new boat market has been fairly steady, as you can see in the slide. There, we had a peak in both new boat sales and pre-owned boat sales in the pandemic. So while there was a kind of a hiccup and the whole industry just stopped and then got going again, it was fairly short lived and we came out of it like gangbusters. So most manufacturers that we do business with had a 2 or in sometimes 3-year backlog of orders that people placed during the pandemic, knowing that they weren't going to get it right away, but no one knew how long it was going to go on for. And so, the total transaction volume, peaked out in the pandemic at 1.2 million. So that's new plus pre-owned. And it was about, 250,000 new boats, just shy of a million pre-owned boats. But we also saw an uptick in pre-owned boats where people were selling because there was, basically the field inventory was entirely depleted. Anything that was for sale got sold. So there was almost nothing left.
You were there to ride that wave. How was that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you saw it. It was a seller's market at that time. You could ask anything you wanted and, you had people fighting over it. We've seen the same trend in the real estate market as well. There was just not enough inventory. Now, Peter, as you've said, it is a buyer's market. People are having to, when they're selling under value, in my opinion. So, it has been a drastic switch. And we saw that on the slide before that it came from, a drop with the pandemic, then a super rise, and then almost a drop again where we were in 2008 and 2009. And it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of years how we climb or even dip down in 2026 for next year's data.
There's a lot of things going on in the market. It's very fluid between interest rates and tariffs and whatever. I'm surprised that it's not worse than it's been so far, compared to what's going on globally. It's kind of like, okay, we're hanging in there.
It is very resilient. I would agree with that. Um, it's important to tell that story too, Peter. So thank you for saying that. I put up on screen now your slide on the age of boats for each type, each segment that you follow. And it's very interesting to see again. No surprise, we saw this earlier. The average sail vessel is today about 36 years old versus, I'd say, the youngest will be towards the pontoon boat since it's a newer type of vessel. What other findings would you want to share on this slide with us?
If you look at it, about each year. So we've got a 10-year time frame, and you've got about 5 years age. So about, every year, the average boat that is sold in the pre-owned market is half a year older. So that is likely to continue. The hot segments of pontoon, saltwater fish, towboats, it's muted. So that's because there is more volume that has gone into the market, and those boats are starting to trade hands. So if we want to go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm. Here it is.
So this is the distribution of those boats. So you can see that, cut it at 20 years of saying, okay, it's 20 years old or more. And, in the case of cruisers, 60%. In the case of sailboats, 90% of the boats that traded hands in the pre-owned market were 20 years or older. And, jumping down into, for example, in pontoons, it's kind of an interesting dynamic. And part of the growth of the pontoon boat market is a geographic one. Go back prior to 2000 and even before that, you had Great Lakes and you had Texas, and those were huge pontoon boat markets. But it was fairly concentrated in those two markets. Well, it morphed across the entire U.S. Lakes, rivers, saltwater, everywhere. Pontoon boats started showing up. So the drive to consume that much product was driven by the fact that there was no pre-owned market. It didn't exist. There wasn't anything to buy. It was new or nothing relative to pontoon boats. That is no longer the case now. So going forward, this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge, as all of those pontoon boats that have been added in these markets, now there is a pre-owned market where before one didn't exist. If anybody ever wanted to know that, then we can actually forecast, here's what the supply of pre-owned is going to be.
We're only scratching the surface, but it really demonstrates your capabilities to guide the industry and various players. And here is a breakdown of the new boat sales by segment, so by type of vessel. And we can, again, see the rise in pontoon has actually stopped right around COVID and then started to decrease. Can we comment on that at all? Too fast, too soon?
Well, I think it probably got oversupplied. And we see it, we get about 3 new pontoon companies coming in every 4 months. So there's been, it's just to the comments earlier about, okay, fine, when there's demand for something, supply comes to meet it.
Yeah. But it remains at a very high level also,
Yeah,
right? So, like, that's
yep.
really
And it
shocking
will
still.
continue. I don't, it's just, I don't think we'll see the same growth trajectory
Mhm.
that we've seen. It's just a law of numbers. It's so big now that it's hard to move those numbers relative to what it used to be. When it was 12,000 units a year versus 50 or 60 or 70,000, it's a lot harder to move that needle, so to speak. But, most of these segments, on the new boat market side, have really kind of just softened a bit.
So next, we're going to look at the map representation of some of these numbers that you've been sharing with us. And we can see that the size of the dot on the map represents the size of that particular segment into this state. So this slide that we're presenting here shows the new powerboat sales by state for the last 12 months. And we're seeing a decrease in the current 12-month period compared to prior. We're down 8%. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct. Yeah. That's across everything except PWCs, which I left out of here.
High level, we obviously see that pontoon continues to be a dominant player along with freshwater fish. What else can we learn from this chart, Peter?
Yeah, it's interesting in that if you have visibility to the slide, the color is darker red means it's declining more rapidly, and lighter is okay, it's more muted. So the thing that's kind of changed is the entire country is behaving similarly, which is unusual. Usually there's something going on in like Florida, for example, where for years it's been growth, population, people moving in, buying whatever, but at this juncture, or at least over the last year, the entire country is in this moderated stage, not cataclysmic anywhere, but not vibrant anywhere either. To go back to, for example, in South Dakota, went berserk when they found shale oil, and all of a sudden everybody was going up to work the rigs. They were well paid, and they were recreating and buying boats like crazy. It seems like it's more a national moderated phase at this point.
Right.
It's down 8% on a national basis, and it's pretty uniform across the different states.
One other thing I wanted to clarify, Peter, we didn't discuss what the other segment means for InfoLink. Can you clarify for us what that other segment includes?
Basically, it's the kitchen sink. So it's everything that doesn't fit in these categories. So it would be things like inflatables, small skiffs that, okay, it's a canoe with a little motor on it. It's that kind of thing. Flight boards, you name it. If it's
Okay.
required to be registered, we account for it. So, it includes airboats, which is tiny, but it's what do you
Okay.
do with it?
Yeah,
That
it
kind of
goes
thing.
into the other category. Got it. All right. And finally, this slide here. This is super critical. And I know in the industry, um, from my days working for Group Beneteau and being very focused on new boats and trying to manage a dealer network and inventory, this shows the days on market for different segments over the years. So, Peter, what can you draw from this slide?
Yeah. So, not to bore you with how the sausage is made, but there's code in every hull ID that tells us when the boat was manufactured. And then we're picking up from the registration, the actual registration date. So that's basically the sale. When it gets registered is delivery to the end consumer. They have to process a registration for them to, leave, and whatever the insurance company has to get it, and all that kind of thing. So it's very similar to if you were to go to the supermarket and pass things over a scanner. Okay, how long was it on the shelf? So this is every single boat that gets registered in the U.S. We can measure this for. So this is the average time, and that would include distribution. So, okay, it's manufactured, then it has to be shipped to wherever it is. It goes to the dealer lot. It sits on the dealer lot. When does it actually make it? So the normal turn, or the healthy turn that we generally have looked for in the industry, is between 180 and 200 days. That's basically 2 times at the dealer level, 2 times turnover annually for everything that's on their
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in an exaggerated position. So it's up in the high 300s days on average. Every boat that gets sold, and this is through January.
This
Oh
one
no,
was
it's
through
through
December of
December. Through
2025.
December, yeah. So the average is 360 days, which is well above the norm. So basically, there is inventory in the field still, and it's been like this for quite some time. I mean, you can see in the graph the pandemic. When we got to the peak of the pandemic, the field inventory was entirely depleted. They literally were shipping them out as fast as possible and going directly to the consumer. They barely even passed by the dealership, and so we got down to 120 days, which is the lowest I've ever seen in the industry. So, what this says is that there is still some dated field inventory out there, which is, potential benefit. And if you go looking for it and you don't require that it has to be the latest model year, whatever, it's been sitting there on the lot, cared for if it's a reputable dealer. And so there's probably some things out there that you can make a deal on. So you can see back, a couple months ago where, it started to come down. We're like, okay, that's it. The field inventory is now depleted. We're getting back to normal, but the supply has started coming in. So they started refilling the pipeline, and probably a little bit too early. So now it's heading back up again. But, if you're in the market today for a new boat, there's probably, do some research, and there are probably some deals to be had out there because it's sitting on the lot, and that costs money to carry that inventory for an extended period of time. It eats into your margin as a dealer.
Absolutely. And the average time on market that we're seeing now also means that some of these distributors who are putting that inventory on floor plan have to start paying what we call curtailments. The moment you have to start making payments on inventory, you're kind of losing the game, unfortunately. We're really wishing well for all of those distributors because these are not easy times. I mean, generally, we feel pretty optimistic about the market. There is no crash to be found. There is definitely caution. When consumer confidence goes down and interest rates kind of struggle to go down, and those are trends that we're following. We're going to be reporting some more actually on pre-owned sales and the market on our side. So stay tuned for the next episode of Full Displacement coming up. We'll be talking about these. Thank you so much, Peter. How optimistic are you about the market as you see it and you have conversations with a lot of OEMs and manufacturers? Do you care to share your impressions on this market?
Sure. Yeah, it's we're looking at it from a lot of different perspectives because of the audience that we deal with is so wide that some are looking at okay, we feel like we've done a great job in our segment, so we're seeing a lot more exploration. Should I be looking at this? Should I, outside of my
Right.
segment? And we're getting a lot of requests for information, on businesses that they're not in,
So
that
here
kind
we're
of thing.
to be specific, we're talking about manufacturers that are considering branching out or doing some other things and being a
Yeah,
little
and from
creative.
one segment from saltwater fish into something other than saltwater fish.
Got it.
And they usually start with kind of a similar thing as well, what else is out there? Well, what should we be looking at?
Right.
Let's look at our existing footprint, our dealer footprint. What are the other products that okay we can kind of get continuity with our existing dealership base? Because that's much easier to set up a new distribution network is an undertaking for sure. So we're seeing a lot of that, and it's just also being smarter about what you're doing. Don't waste resources. Do your due diligence. We're seeing some people come in from outside the industry, because a lot of the people that are in the business have been here for a long time. Well, there's work to be done, but we're here. It's not going anywhere. Boats are going to continue to exist. People are going to still love them and enjoy them, and we're hoping to contribute to getting more people, new people into it. We use it in our daily lives that we'd love to take people out on boats for the first time. I think, as we had spoken about before, some people, it just light up like a Christmas tree. They're like, oh my God, I had
Absolutely.
no idea. And it's kind of an interesting moment, but that's the beginning of a journey. It takes a
Yeah.
while to get someone to the comfort level. And that's where these boat clubs, I think, come in is it gets
Sure.
people further down the chain at the point that they are comfortable, that they know what they're doing, and
Absolutely.
then they're more likely to buy a boat because they're more likely to do the right thing.
Exactly our mission too at Current Yachts. We're here to educate, we're here to support. So whether you're, looking to sell or buy a boat now or in the future and want some help with that, do call on to us. We thank InfoLink for doing your part in informing the actors of the market to make the best decisions to meet the demand, existing and new. So thanks again for your contribution, Peter, and those insights that are typically reserved for the industry and are allowing today the consumer to understand what is happening in the boating market. So with this, we will see you on the next one. Thanks, Peter. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
very much
Peter.
for having us. We're happy to do it. Okay. Take care.
Fair winds.
Fair winds.